All right, everybody. Well, happy Sunday, and it is so good to be back with you all again. My name is Jackson. I'm one of the pastors here at Cypress, if I've never gotten to meet you, and I want to give everyone a welcome here at the Alton Darby, our broadcast location. But for anyone right now that's also in the room at any of our other Cypress locations, I'm so glad that you could be in church today, and anyone that's worshiping online. We're going to be getting into a new series together today, but before we do, there's two things that I want to be sure to pass on to you first. And the first thing being that, man, if you were not able to be part of the Cypress experience last weekend at any of our campuses, it was one of the most incredible weekends we've had in a long time. And we wrapped up our series, The Great Debate, but even more than the teaching series we wrapped up, there was over 100 people throughout our entire church that went public with their faith. And I just heard a couple days ago that our Dublin campus is actually continuing the celebration. There's 5 more people this morning in our Dublin campus that are going public. So let's all celebrate those people. It is so incredible to be a part of a church where life change is like the norm. And it's so important that we don't take this for granted and that we celebrate the miracle of life change every time. And for the 5 people who are part of our church at our Dublin campus, we're so proud of you, and your entire church family is celebrating with you today. And the second thing that I want to be sure to touch base on is I promised some people in our marketing and communications team I would let you know that our fall merch line is officially available at your campus. So it's in the lobby at your campus. I told him I would tell you, but even better than telling you, I'm showing you. So this is one of the 3 shirts that we have. This is a Ephesians 3:20 graphic tee with, I think, is a pretty cool logo on the back. We also have, there's a Christmas sweatshirt. There's a variety of different hats. And if this merch line goes anything like the others, if you're thinking about getting something, I would not wait till next weekend. So if you want that, you can check it out in your lobby after service. And one other thing about this merch, just because I just want to be totally transparent with you all. Whenever we do this as a church, there's no markup, and these are totally just sold at cost. So our goal whenever we do merch as a church is not to make a profit off of it. It really is just like those Cypress bumper stickers. It's just another easy way to continue to get the name of our church out into our community. So just want to be sure that you know that. And now we can start to get into our new teaching series that we're going to be in for the whole month of November. It's called Thanking Through It. It's a teaching series on the topic of thankfulness. And just to kind of tell you kind of where this whole idea for this series came from, the team that gets together to kind of plan these was just kind of thinking through the season of life that we're in. This is a really busy time of the year for most of us. And if you have kids, the school year's into full swing, semesters are in the middle. I mean, if you're at work, there's usually like deadlines and things that you're trying to wrap up by the time holidays get here with Thanksgiving and Christmas. And also, I don't know if you've been counting, but we just hit you with 8 straight weeks of money and politics. So we kind of thought it was time to talk about being happy together. So for a few weeks, we're going to talk about this whole idea of thankfulness and really kind of lean into some of the nuanced principles of what it is. And I want to share with you an update on my son that will sort of set up where we're going in this very first week. My son, Keelan, he's almost 3.5 months old. And man, time is flying by. And he just got to this stage in his life where he's really starting to be able to engage and interact with us more. And I know talking to some parents, they love that newborn stage. We're thankful that we're sleeping better now. And he's starting to be able to smile and laugh and like do things with us. We just got pictures a couple of weeks ago, and I brought one just to show you how big he's getting. That's Keelan right there. And he is loving his life. And we all look good because Mom dressed us this day. But we had a lot of fun doing a couple of different photo shoots recently. And he's starting daycare soon. He's been in the nursery. And he just rolled over the other day. So he got his first big skill down, and y'all, when he rolled over, I pretty much lost my mind. I mean, I witnessed it, and there's only been a few times he's really cried, and it's when I scared him because I'm so proud of him. And so he rolled over and then got scared, but what's crazy to think about, this is something my wife Olivia and I have been talking about. There's going to be a day where Keelan's going to grow up, Keelan's going to be crawling, and he's going to be walking. And even further down the road, like Keelan's going to have a job one day. He's going to have a family. Like he's going to be a contributing member to our society, which is so crazy to think about for someone who just eats and sleeps and poops right now. But he will get there one day. But in order to get there someday, the first skill that he has to do is he has to roll over. Like it all hinges on that first skill. You can't eventually get a job if you don't know how to roll over. That's where it all starts. Now, this whole topic of thankfulness, this is a big topic, and it really, when you fully embrace thankfulness and you practice it daily and you understand what gratitude means, it has the power to completely change your life, but it all starts with a single skill, and the skill that I want to talk about in this first week, it's training your mind. Thankfulness, it has to begin as a mindset. And when it comes to developing the mindset of thankfulness, you have a lot of power to be able to do this yourself, but you don't have everything that you need. And the first step to developing a mindset of thankfulness is to admit, God, I need your help in this. I can't do it on my own. And this idea of admitting is interesting because if you've been taught to be like a self-reliant, independent person, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, do it yourself, then admitting weakness or admitting you don't have what it takes, it can seem like a weakness, but it's really not. And if any of you have any family or friends that have been through, it's one of the most popular recovery programs in the world now. It's Alcoholics Anonymous, or otherwise known as AA. There's a 12-step process, and it all begins, if you're struggling with alcoholism, is that you have to get to a point where you admit, I need a greater power than I currently possess. I can't do it on my own. And I recognize that a lot of us don't have a problem right now with alcohol, but a lot of us, and myself included, I've had a problem with thankfulness and gratitude in my life. And just like that, you have to come to the realization, life is too hard just to keep my head down and grind through it and try to figure this out on my own. I actually have to admit, God, I need you to transform my mind. And what happens when you admit is that something cool happens. In a weird way, it almost makes you feel better than trying to do it on your own. And I have an example of this, of when someone admitted something and it made everyone feel a lot better. I've shared a couple different times of different hiking trips that I've been on over the years. And I think that I've given some of you the wrong impression because I've had people that have come to me and ask for advice when they go on hiking trips. Y'all, I'm not a hiker, okay? I would not characterize myself as a hiker. I have a brother and a sister-in-law who are big-time hikers. And any trip I've ever been on, and probably any trip I'll ever go on, has been with them. And my brother, Mac, is the one who plans the whole thing. And so we've tagged along a few different times, and it was a couple summers ago. It was a 2-week trip in Canada. And so we went up to Canada, hit a few different parks, and it was like day 3 or 4 of this 2-week trip, and there was some bad weather starting to roll in, and we were going up to the top of something. It was called Tent Ridge Trail. And as we're making our way up, the bad weather's rolling in, and we're getting close to the ridge, or like the thing that we were hiking to get to. And Max says to the group, because there was a group of us, he said, you all stay here. I'm going to go up to the top and see what the wind is like, what the weather's like. And if it's good, we'll do it. But if not, we might have to end up turning around. Matt goes up. He's gone for probably 20 minutes. Matt comes back down, and he tells us, you guys, it's so windy. It's terrible. We're not going to be able to do this. Now, when those words came out of my brother Mac's mouth, we were blown away because, and I realized a lot of you don't know Mac. But my brother Mac, you all have seen shows like Survivor or Naked and Afraid. You could drop my brother Mac naked in the woods with nothing, and he would be completely fine. I mean, I would not worry a thing about him. And so when Mac comes down and he says, you guys, we don't have what it takes. We can't finish this. We were blown away, but we were also very at peace. We said, you know what, that's fine. We'll head back down. We'll do another one tomorrow. Now, what we didn't know is that when Matt got to the top of this trail, this is what he saw, and he came back down to report. This is what the ridge looked like, that we were literally going to be walking along this, not holding on to anything, and there were steep drop downs on both sides. And we told Matt, like, it could have been sunny and 80. No one was doing this. So, but he came back down and he told us, you guys, we probably shouldn't do it. So we all went back down, and we all felt so much better. We made dinner, and it was fine. He admitted, hey, guys, we don't have what it takes. And the way that it's supposed to work in our Christian life is we're supposed to often, not rarely, but often admit, God, I don't have what it takes. And the Apostle Paul wrestled with this in the New Testament. He had an issue that he was trying to solve on his own, and he was trying to figure out how to do it on his own, and he came to the realization, if I admit my weakness to God, if I just give it to him, his power actually works even better in and through my life. And it was in 2 Corinthians where Paul explains he learned this concept, and he said, so now I am actually glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. And if you're anything like me, this idea of thankfulness and gratitude in training your mind, it's been something that I've struggled with and I've worked with because I feel like I'm working at it from a place on my own. And so when you admit, God, I need your help in this, I want to tap into the resources and the tools that you've given me. What are some of the things that God has given us that we can use to train our mindset? This is just a short list that I put together. This is not a comprehensive list. These are just a few different examples of the ways that you can train your mind, and it's to surround yourself with the right community. It's to tap into resources like counselors. It's to pray. It's to find sunshine, to be outside. God has given doctors as tools. It's God's word. It's listening to worship music. It could be exercise or laughter. And like I said, this list could go on and on. What you have to do is you have to figure out what's the right routine for me, and then once you do, you just do it over and over and over and over again. And by doing that, you start training your mind to think differently than the natural human spirit leans to. And I debated all week whether or not I should bring this up because I think it might gross some of you out. But I really think it's for your own good and it could be helpful, so I'm going to do it. And there's a couple verses I want to share with you. The first one is Joshua 1:8. In the Old Testament, Joshua writes, and he says, study this book of instruction continually, meditate on it day and night, so that you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all that you do. Now, I want to talk about this word meditate. The word meditate right now in our culture, it seems as though it's not directly tied to Christianity, but a lot of people talk about it whenever they talk about being spiritual, whatever that means for them, and this idea of meditating. But the principle of meditation is a biblical principle that goes back thousands of years ago. And it comes up in Joshua, but I also counted, there's at least 7 times in the Psalms that David writes about this and instructs people to do it. One of them's in Psalm 1, the 2nd verse, where David says, but they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night. Now, what meditate actually means is it's the same word that the Bible uses when it talks about ruminate. What does ruminate mean? Rumination is what cows do when they're chewing their cud. All right, this is where things are going to get a little bit weird. But when cows eat grass, what they do is they go out to the field, okay, they get some grass, they start chewing it up, and they chew it up enough to the point where they can swallow it. Well, then they throw it back up in their mouth, they keep it in their mouth, and then they chew it some more, and then they chew it, and then they swallow it again, and then they throw it back up, but keeping it in their mouth, and then they start chewing it some more, and then they swallow it, and then they throw it back up, and then they chew it some more, and then they swallow it, and they do this over and over and over again. That word ruminate is the same word the Bible uses for meditate. To meditate is to find your routine, to find how to train your mind, and literally just do it over and over and over and over again. And what this means is it means that reading the same 3 verses in the morning that may actually be more beneficial for you than flying through 3 chapters and not really remembering what you read. Or if there's that one worship song right now that for whatever reason, whenever you hear the chorus, you feel like God is just speaking directly to you, the most beneficial thing you might be able to do is every morning on your way to work for the next month, just play it and allow God's Spirit to speak over you. This idea of meditation, of rumination, it's doing the same thing over and over and over. And I've got to believe that talking about this idea of thankfulness, and especially in the month of November, I'm sure there's some people that have been in church for years, and as soon as I said it, you thought to yourself, okay, I've heard this one before, right? Like Thanksgiving is coming up. We're supposed to count our blessings. We're supposed to be grateful. I am blessed. I understand that. But the goal of having a series like this, it's not just to know it, it's actually to allow it to like seep into you. And even as I was preparing for this first week, I was using the Bible software program I usually use, and it just spits out like 100 different verses on the topic of thankfulness. And as I was going through them, there were a few that I looked at and I was like, I've heard that, everyone's heard that, I'm not even going to use it. What I love about Cypress is that every single week there's people that have never heard God's word before, that are at all of our campuses. And for some of you, this will be the first time you've heard this, and I think that's so incredible and awesome. But for others of you, you've probably heard this verse one or two times before, but I still want to share it with you, and it's in Psalm 118, where David is writing, and he says, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." This verse, the goal of this verse, whenever you see it, is not just to read it. And I would even argue the goal is not just to memorize it. When David wrote this and he said, "This is the day the Lord has made, we will rejoice and be glad in it," he was hoping that what people would do with that is that they would take it, they would fully embody it, so that every single day when your eyes open, before your feet even hit the floor, it changes your outlook on your day every single day for the rest of your life. That actually has the power to change your life. And so this idea of thankfulness, and a lot of us having heard it before, this is the goal. It's to find what are the verses, what are the things that I can do, the routines I can start to start changing my mind, and then do it over and over and over. And as you do that, something physically actually changes in your brain. And I think this is so cool because this is one of the many areas where God's word and science, they really see eye to eye on. And the reason I say that is what happens is that repeated thoughts in your brain, they create paths. They're called neural pathways, and you can almost envision them as like brain ruts. So when a car drives the same path over and over and over, eventually there's ruts that will form. That same thing happens in your brain. And then what happens is as those ruts get set in, there's a system, it's called the reticular activating system at the stem of your brain that it almost like makes them concrete. And the reticular activating system, I took one semester of anatomy. My professors would be so proud. I mean, I'm nailing this right now. But the reticular activating system, what it does is once those repeated thoughts happen over time, whether it's months or whether it's years, they end up getting set. And then what happens is that it uses established beliefs in your mind to screen any incoming information. And if that information fits into the ruts, then your mind accepts it. And if it doesn't, then it rejects it. And what's cool is that this isn't even just the way humans were created. Like when God created the animals, they even have these systems. So if they experience the same thing, or if you do the same thing, these ruts will form in their brain. And how many of you across all of our campuses, if you have a dog living in your home, I want you to raise your hand. Raise it high. Oh, that's probably the vast majority of us. All right, you can put your hands down. So my wife Olivia and I, we currently don't have a dog, but we both grew up with dogs. And I can remember there was one time, it was the first dog that we ever had in my house growing up, a little Lhasa Apso named Spunky. And man, I loved Spunky. And one of the things that we did is we eventually realized that Spunky would chase us, chase the neighbor kids, so we needed to install an electrical fence. And so I remember my parents, they had someone come out, they got it all set up, and it only took a few times, and then Spunky realized, okay, I can't cross this boundary anymore. And then there was one summer, and I can't remember if this was a summer where my brothers and I did all the landscaping, or if we were able to talk my dad into hiring someone to do it. But someone, whether it was us or them, when they were doing it with a shovel, they cut the electrical fence so it stopped working. And we kind of took a couple days to figure out, like, what are we going to do? We're going to have to replace it. Well, we never had to replace it because Spunky knew I can't cross this boundary. So what happens is when you experience the same things, when you think the same things over and over, that's how you begin to process life. So if you wake up every day and you think to yourself, man, I am so blessed in so many ways. When you wake up and you go about your day, you will see God's blessings everywhere. And if you wake up in the morning and you think to yourself, man, I have so many problems that need taken care of, It's Monday, I have this going on at work, I have this going on with my kids, I got so many issues. You will see problems everywhere in your life. And this isn't just what the Bible teaches, this is how God actually wired our minds to work. Your perception changes everything. And I want to give you a personal example of a way that I feel like God has been teaching me this recently. This past week, it was an awesome, busy week. I spent a couple days in Kentucky with Olivia and Keelan at a college for our resident intern program. And there were actually a few different trips that happened this week. There were different teams at different college campuses all throughout the country. And one of the cool things is, man, there are just so many students right now that are hearing about what God is doing at Cypress and just want to come be part of it. And so we were down in Kentucky having awesome conversations. It was a good week. We woke up Monday morning and got a little bit out of our normal routines. And so we were heading down. We had different classes we were teaching in, different meetings set up with professors. And we ended up getting a later lunch, and Keelan had not gotten a nap in. And we felt like we had established a pretty good routine up to this point. We knew this would be a challenge, but after lunch, he starts getting a little bit fussy, a little bit cranky. And I told Olivia, because I had finished my meal, I said, I'll take him out. I said, you take your time, you finish. When you're done, you can come join us. And if I knew what was about to happen, I probably wouldn't have said that, because we had our first public meltdown, you all, with Dad, of course. And I took him out, and I've always experienced this, but from another parent holding their screaming baby. I have more sympathy now than I've ever had in my life. And it's one of those things where there's people slamming office windows around me. I'm trying to rock him and smile and make eye contact so people know I'm not hurting him, I promise. But he was screaming, he was crying, and it kind of threw off the rest of the day. I mean, he was fussing the rest of the day. We just passed him back and forth as we did our thing. We ended up not getting into our hotel until later. I picked up dinner at 8 or 9. We got back, we ate, we eventually got him to bed. I had an inbox of emails then to start getting through, and then a message on thankfulness to start preparing for. And I told Olivia, and it was out of frustration, I said, I feel like I'm at a point in my life right now where literally all that I do, I said, I'm either at church, I'm either working, or I'm taking care of him. I was like, those are the only three things I feel like I'm doing with my life right now. Now, I want to take you back a few years ago. When Olivia and I first got married, we moved to Kentucky, and I went to seminary down there, and we were kind of praying and dreaming what God had in store for our future, but we knew this was not the final destination. We were just talking and praying about, man, if we could ever find a church community to be part of, and we didn't know if we'd come back to Cypress or what it would look like, if we could ever find a church community like that where hundreds of people are getting baptized and the church is on fire for God, and if in that church, if we could ever have any sort of a role on the team where we could be leading and caring for people and teaching and doing different things. And then 1 year ago, y'all, I would have done anything to have this little boy that we get to take care of now. And I almost felt on Monday, as I was laying in bed trying to sleep, God was speaking to me so you're telling me that because I've given you everything that you've ever asked for, now you have more problems in your life and you don't know how to deal with them. And oftentimes, I think we have to realize that sometimes the frustrations, sometimes the problems that you and I face, they're not actually problems that we need to get rid of. We just need to train our minds to develop a new sort of perspective. And when you ask yourself, all right, well then how do I develop that right perspective? We have to zoom out, and we can't just zero in on, okay, feeling frustrated in the moment, how do I change? What do I do? We have to ask ourselves, what are the other influences that are flooding our minds the other 23 hours of every day? Because if you realize, and this is something that psychologists talk all about, it's the law of exposure. Whatever your mind is exposed to the most, that is what you're going to start feeling. It's what you're going to start believing, and then it's what you're going to start giving out to other people. And so you have to look at your life and ask, what are the things that you're doing? And this is why in the New Testament, I think when Paul was writing to the Philippians, he thought it would be helpful. He probably knew there were some type A Christians out there that wanted a list. Like Paul, okay, if I'm going to develop the right perspective, then what are the things that I should be intentionally allowing into my mind so that I can actually be thankful and grateful and feel the things that I want to feel? And so Paul, he put together this list for them, and he explained this to them. In Philippians 4, he said, now, dear brothers and sisters, he said, one final thing, I want you to fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you learned and received from me, everything that you heard me doing and you saw me doing, and then the God of peace will be with you. And so Paul gives them this list of these different things, and he said, if you want to feel thankful, if you really want to embrace gratitude in your life, then what you have to do is you have to place a filter on your mind and only let these things in. All right, you have to, and go with me here, but you almost have to train your mind to be the bouncer standing outside of the nightclub. And you're checking IDs. Are you on this list? You're asking questions, because if you do not fit the criteria of this list, then you do not belong here. And so what are the things that you're being exposed to? What are the conversations you're finding yourself in? Because I would argue that everything you're exposing yourself to, it's either making you more thankful, more anxious, it's doing something to you. You just have to pause and to ask yourself, what is it doing? And so hearing all of this, there's probably some of us that are thinking, that I think this is probably good and helpful for some people, but I've pretty much tried everything. I've pretty much tried everything, and I'm just not that optimistic. And whether it's a result of habits that you've had in your life, maybe it's a previous relationship and that influence that it had on you, maybe it's the family of origin that you grew up in, positivity and optimism just wasn't the norm in your life. And what I would encourage you with is that for the Apostle Paul, this was not something that came naturally to him either. And in Romans chapter 7, he basically is saying, I'm so frustrated because he said, I know what I should be doing. I know what I should be thinking and feeling. But he said, there's something in me that I just can't quite do it. And it's in Philippians 4, verse 11, where Paul wrote this. This is 5 years later after the frustration he felt when he was writing to the Romans. And he said, not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. And then he says this again. He said, I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, or with plenty or little. And he goes on to say, it's what God does in my life. It's not my ability to do it on my own. But he says 2 different times in this passage, this is something I've learned. In other words, Paul is saying, I used to not have this skill. I've been through the ringer. I've experienced a lot of different challenges in life. And now I've learned that I can actually be content and grateful no matter what it is that I face. And I've heard too many people say, I'm just not optimistic. I'm not that kind of a person. Optimism is not a personality trait, y'all. Optimism is a result of having your hope rooted in something that your circumstances cannot shake. And when you do that, then no matter what's happening in your life around you, your mind has been trained to be grateful, so it really doesn't matter. And Paul wanted more than anything to be out on the streets of Rome preaching the gospel, baptizing people. Like, things weren't going great in Paul's life. When you read these New Testament letters, it seems like he was just kind of sitting up in the penthouse and had it made. His dream was to be out there and being the pastor, to be leading these churches, to be planning more churches, to be meeting with leaders. But what Paul was doing is Paul was sitting in prison in Rome, and he had to write the letter to the church that he actually wanted to be present at. And so what did Paul decide to do? Paul said, well, since I can't be out there preaching on the streets, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to preach to the prison guards, and I'm going to save their family, and their whole family is going to be baptized. And then the Roman prosecutor and the judges, they said, all right, well, should we kill him then? And Paul said, well, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. He said, I'd rather be with God anyways, so if you want to do that, go ahead. But since I'm here, I'll preach to people. And if you're the Romans, what do you do with a guy like that? I mean, there's nothing that you can do to stop him. Paul had completely adopted the mindset of thankfulness, and it was changing every aspect of his life. And the great news that I have for you today is that what God did to Paul, God can also do to you. God's the one that will change your life. God's the one that will do it. And Paul wrote this in Romans. In Romans 12:2, he said, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. So as you work on changing your mind, God is the one who will be faithful to change your life. There is so much power in your perspective, and this is what Paul is teaching us. Now, over the course of the rest of this series, we're going to look at more specific examples of how do you really practice thankfulness. Like, how do you do it when life gets really, really hard? What are some of the habits that thankful people have put into their life? How is thankfulness a response to all the things that God has already done to us? And it's going to be an awesome rest of the series. I really think we're going to be able to lean in and be able to experience some of the blessings that come from adopting this new mindset. And the way that I want to wrap this up, it's a little bit different than I normally do. I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone right now at all of our campuses to stand up. And so no matter what campus location you are at, you can stand on up. And as I was just kind of thinking and praying through this week of how I wanted to wrap up this time, in light of the week that I had and I felt like the things God was teaching me, there were a few different statements that I ended up writing down almost as like my personal proclamation over this whole topic. And just like we said in the beginning, I don't think the goal of whether it's scripture or things that you take away from a weekend message, the goal isn't just to read it or to write it down. It's really to own it, like to fully embody it, and then allow you to carry it into your week so that it changes your outlook on life. And it's 3 statements that I've written down for myself that I just want to share for you and I want you to own as well. And the first statement is I want you to know that the blessings of God, they're in my life. They're in your life. You just have to choose to see them. The blessings of God are everywhere. They're in your life. The favor of God, it's on your life. God has a plan and a purpose for your future, even in those days and weeks where you get frustrated and it's hard to see it, it's hard to imagine it. And because those 2 things are true, I choose today to rejoice and be glad in it. We are so blessed in so many ways. We have so many things to be thankful for, but know that it all starts by training your mind and developing this new mindset. So God, I thank you so much for this weekend. Thank you for the opportunity that we have today to reframe our problems with a new perspective. Lord, for the person right now who feels like they've been struggling with this for their whole life, I pray that you would allow them to know that when we admit our weakness, God, that is not the end of the journey, but that's the beginning of being restored by you. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for our mercy. We thank you for all of the blessings that you continue to pour out in our life. And as we go out of this place today, God, allow us to see them the way that you would see them. We love you. We praise you. We pray this all in your name. And everybody said, amen.